Today's life slice is about, can you hear my cat? He wants his dinner. Come here there, Ozzy. So today's life slice is about what I've done to cope with arthritis. Come here then. You can probably hear him. So I have a condition called ankylosing spondylitis, which is an inherited condition with a genetic predisposition. So I carry a particular antigen called HLA-B27. And because I carry it, I am therefore more prone to developing this form of arthritis, though you can carry the antigen and not actually develop the disease. Unfortunately, from the age of about 8 or 9, I started limping and used to get, well, I didn't know what it was at the time, but it was sciatic pain all down one leg. I was always involved in gymnastics and running around and high impact kind of stuff, which I think probably exacerbated it. So through my childhood, no one knew what it was. I think there was a theory that one leg was longer than the other, which was rubbish. I went on to train as a nurse, which was probably one of the worst careers that you could do with ankylosing spondylitis. We're talking about 1989 here when I did my nurse training, because we used to have to do a lot of lifting. I know it's changed now, and in most hospitals, patient lifting is done by hoists, but when I was training, we lifted all the patients ourselves. So my back problems suddenly worsened at that time. I probably wasn't also eating very well. I was a young student nurse, so I certainly wasn't doing things to enhance my health or to dampen down the inflammatory response in my body. So anyway, it wasn't until I was nearly 20 that I was tested for the HLA-B27 antigen, because I'd developed something called plantar fasciitis, which is like a bruising pain in your heel, so you can't put your heel down. And I broke one of my toes because I kept walking on my toes, and that's when the doctors thought there was probably an inflammatory response going on in my body. I'd been waking with morning stiffness in my back for years. I'd got various mattresses, and nothing had worked. And it was pretty painful. I remember having, not being able to get out of bed in the morning. I was like an old woman. Anyway, so finally I got diagnosed with ankylosing spondylitis, and I was put onto non-steroidal anti-inflammatories. I can't remember the name of the first one I was on, but because it was so long ago. But as with all non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, long-term use can be quite damaging to the body, and they do increase the risks of heart attack. So I've been through 3 different anti-inflammatories. I was then put on Vioxx after the first anti-inflammatory had proven to increase heart attacks in people, but then Vioxx was found to have significant side effects. So then I was put on naproxen, which I know a lot of people take, naproxen. I still got naproxen in my cupboard. I still have a repeat prescription for it, but I don't take it anymore. And naproxen can be quite bad for your stomach long term as well. In 2012, I watched a programme by Dr. Michael Mosley all about fasting. The 5-2 diet is the very famous diet that people have heard of now. And Michael Mosley is a doctor, he's a scientist, he looks at the evidence base behind health practices, and he presented a very convincing evidence base behind fasting. At the time I was in my mid-30s. No, I'm talking about 2012, so it's 5 years ago. So I was in my early 40s, so I think I'm younger than I am. So fasting not only can control your weight, and that's how it was being used in the programme, but I was really interested in the other effects it had, which was to reduce inflammation in the body. It seemed to switch off the growth genes that can lead to cancers and heart disease, and it switched on the repair genes that therefore repair our body. And the compelling argument in the programme was that our bodies, in evolutionary terms, haven't caught up with our cultural development. In other words, our diet is now high in protein. We have easy access, or certainly in the UK, we have easy access to protein-rich foods, and our bodies are, or our behaviours are designed to make the most of opportunities of protein and high fat foods. Hence why a lot of us have a problem with overeating on high fats foods and proteins. I mean, I, for example, absolutely love cream, double cream, and I'll have double cream with everything. Well, in fact, I have everything with double cream, so I'm a bit of a double cream fiend. So what Mark and Moser was saying is our bodies in evolutionary terms change much more slowly than human endeavour has changed. And so this access to all these high protein foods used to be a good thing for our bodies, because it meant that our growth genes switched on. Here's the other one, Fred, it's getting near dinner time. Our growth genes switched on, and therefore the body could make the most of the proteins and the fats that we're eating. But obviously in today's world, what that means is these growth genes are constantly switched on because we are constantly feeding ourselves with high protein, high fat foods. So he supposed, or he hypothesised, that if we fast for a 24-hour period, then we will reverse those damaging effects, because those genes will switch themselves off, and instead our repair genes will switch on. And since that programme in 2012, there's been lots of growing evidence that fasting is health protective for many different conditions. So I started fasting in 2012. I even wrote a blog post about my experiences of it at the time, which I'll pop in the link below. And I found pretty much immediate differences. I initially started fasting twice a week, so I had weight loss, obviously, because I was restricting my calorie intake during the week, and yet I could eat what I wanted on the other 5 days. So my weight stabilised. I had an age spot on my cheek, which you can see in my blog post, which has disappeared, and it never, ever, ever returned. It was somewhere around there. You know, those sort of flat, pale spots. It's never come back again. At the time I had this weird sort of water growth on my back that I'd been to the doctors about, and they told me it was nothing to worry about, but it was a sign of age. Within about 2 weeks of fasting it fell off, and it's never been back since, and my back is absolutely fine. So I immediately felt the benefits of fasting, and I'd always got used to taking naproxen pretty regularly for my back pain. I could go a few days without it, but then I would wake with morning stiffness, or I'd have a really bad night's sleep. Or I'd get some pain in the day, and then I'd take a naproxen before going to bed that night. So I was taking probably naproxen 2 or 3 times a week, not every day, but pretty regularly. I was filling my prescription pretty regularly. After I'd been fasting for about a month, I realised that I hadn't been taking my naproxen as regularly, and in fact I was kind of taking it out of habit rather than need. So I thought I'd just stop taking it and see what happens. Well, since then, since mid-2012 sometime, I started fasting in August. By Christmas that year, I had just stopped taking naproxen completely, and I can't remember the last time I took a naproxen tablet. Probably 2.5, 3 years ago. So absolutely, fasting has greatly improved the inflammatory response to my body. In fact, it's damped down the inflammatory response. And then recently, as I'm getting older, I've been thinking about, well, what other things can I do that are health benefits? Because I don't lead a pious and perfect life. I do things that are bad for me. As you already know, I eat lots of double cream. I love processed meats and salamis and foods like that. I drink too much sometimes, and I smoke sometimes, particularly when I've been drinking. So, and when I was younger, I smoked a lot. So I certainly haven't done things that have been particularly kind to my body. So as you get older, you begin to think, oh, what can I do to improve my health further? And that's when I came across turmeric. And again, I think it was Michael Mosley that brought it to my attention. I think he was on a Radio 2 at lunchtime. And what they found is that if you take a teaspoon of turmeric a day, you can significantly reduce the inflammatory response in your body. And what we're beginning to learn is that inflammation is often the precursors of a number of cancers. Not all cancers, and I don't think they understand the mechanisms of what causes all cancers, but certainly some breast cancers and some bowel-based and stomach cancers, potentially other cancers as well, begin with inflammation in the body. So the hypothesis is if you take turmeric to reduce the inflammatory response, in a sense you're protecting yourself against cancer. Now, there isn't a direct link. Turmeric is not a cure for cancer, but there is growing research that turmeric can support people in a preventative approach to cancer. However, what they've also found is you can't just pop a turmeric tablet. And they've tried this. I think Michael Mosley's programme looked at people taking turmeric tablets and people taking actual turmeric. And they think the reason for this is turmeric is not well absorbed into the body. So it needs a fat in order for it to be absorbed into the body. So using it in cooking, so for example in curries and in meats and casseroles, means you've got the fat content there. The other thing they found is that if you add black pepper when you take turmeric, its effect is amplified. So, I no longer suffer from back pain. I don't have an age spot there. My hands are relatively free of age spots as well. In fact, my skin's relatively young looking. Don't get me wrong, I'm 47, but I do often get told I look young for my age. Having said that, I always did look young for my age, even when I was a child. When I was 18, I looked 12, so that might not be relevant. But certainly I feel my skin doesn't look too bad for 47, considering the things that I have done to my skin. Sunbathing to the point of burning in the 1970s and 80s before we properly realised the consequences. Smoking far too much when I was younger. Drinking, still doing bad things now. And yet actually, I think the fasting and the turmeric have certainly helped to stop or to slow down potentially the ageing process. So how do I take my turmeric? Well, I try and put it in as much food as possible. So if I'm making a shepherd's pie, I'll chuck a couple of teaspoons of turmeric in. If I'm making a sausage casserole, it hasn't got a huge flavour or a huge taste. And if there's other big flavours in the dish, then you're not going to notice the turmeric. But you don't want to put turmeric in absolutely everything you eat. So the other way I take turmeric is I make a turmeric milk or turmeric latte. Turmeric's not particularly nice on its own in milk, so I mix it with other things. And that's what the next bit of the video is going to be, is just showing you how I make up my turmeric powder, which I make up in advance, and then whenever I haven't got time, I can just make a turmeric milk to drink. And I do try and drink one a day. Maybe don't always manage that, but certainly I do try to do that. I particularly try to do it on the days that I run, because obviously running might also affect inflammation, or it certainly does affect inflammation in the joints. So I make up the turmeric mix in advance, so when I'm in a hurry I just got it in the cupboard. And this is just approximate, it really is up to you how you do it, but I put about 8 teaspoons of turmeric into the pot, and I get my turmeric from the world food sections in the supermarket, because you get a lot more for your money when you buy it that way. Don't buy it in those tiny little Schwartz things. And then I add, I've got 8 teaspoons of turmeric, a couple of teaspoons of black pepper, maybe a little bit more or less. It doesn't really matter. It's just because turmeric on its own is not very interesting. And then I add in some ground allspice, a teaspoon or 2, some ginger, a teaspoon or 2, cloves, don't add too many cloves. I normally add about a teaspoon of cloves as well. And also some cardamom seeds, though you can buy the cardamom ground if you want to, but because I happen to have the seeds in the cupboard, I just bash them up with the pestle and mortar. And I almost forgot, you also want some vanilla extract. Now you could add some vanilla extract in liquid form to your cup when you make the drink, but I like the ground vanilla, so that's what I use. But it really doesn't matter how you do that. So that means you've got the powder in the cupboard for whenever you want it. I personally use coconut milk, but you could use dairy milk to mix the powder in, or soya milk. Sometimes I use a little bit of coconut milk and dairy milk, depending how I'm feeling. But it's really quite straightforward. You just heat up the milk on the stove with a teaspoon of powder in it. I also have a little bit of honey that I put into my cup, and you just let it come to the boil, and then you drink it. And I really like the flavour of it. My husband says he doesn't like it, but I actually like it. It's quite a spicy flavour. But you can mess around with different ingredients to get the flavour that you want. Word of warning, it gives you a bright yellow tongue and lips, so just check your mouth before you leave the house. So I hope you give it a go. I will put in the links down below some of the evidence base around both fasting and the use of turmeric. And if anyone's got anything else that has a good evidence base for preventing inflammation or reducing inflammation in the body, please add it to the comments below. I'll see you again soon. Bye. And here is the man himself. You alright, Ozzy? You hungry? Ozzy, you hungry? Well, I knew you wouldn't bear it. Fred's come to see what's going on. He can't bear it when other pets get attention. He's the most jealous dog in the world. What's up, Fred? You're wanting your dinner as well? You're very noisy. They tend to get on quite well, though Fred will chase Ozzy in the garden. Ozzy is 15 years old now. He's looking pretty good for his age. He's a good